Okay. I should have probably prepared something. Prepared a real intro. But hi. Hey, thank you all for coming. I'm Myron. Myron Solomon, one half of Lone Liaison. And yeah, man. Over the past week, literally Wayne came to me and was like, yo, there's this dude, his work is crazy. You gotta check it out, right? Um, and I'm like, all right, let's do it. Walk into his room. It's like a cave of magnificent works. And Wayne's like, yeah, we're gonna put together a show. And I'm like, what? When? All right, let's plan it out. Next month? He's like, no, Friday. I'm like, dude, it's Tuesday. Like, what are we gonna do? Um, so, yeah, man, we got to this point, and I am here with a very thought provoking, a very driven, a very passionate person, man. I want to introduce him. His name is Tony Luella Chalmers. Tony, what's good? What's poppin'? How you doing, dude? Tony, so we've been working closely. You and Tony have been, you and Wayne have been working closely over the past 3 months or so. I feel like we've gotten close over the past 2 weeks because first and foremost, let me just say, I was very skeptical, right, when approaching your artwork. And then once you kind of expounded on the different symbolisms, the motifs, all the different things that are inside of the works, it just blew my mind, right? And once you did that, I realized, I'm like, yo, I don't even know where this dude is from. I don't even know who this guy is. So before we get into the madness, you know what I mean? I just kind of want to figure out, yo, who is Tony?
Um, I would say self-educated, driven by this insatiable appetite to know. I was always the kid that had the why, but why, and nothing sufficed. It was like, but why that, why that, and just grew up driven by that, and it was perfect. The environment in which I grew up in was perfect for that because I got to explore the outdoors or outside the nature. I grew up in rural Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta. Um, typical, our sense of space is just vast. Leave the house in the morning, come back for supper, you know, breakfast, mid-supper and then dinner, running through clothesline, running in the woods with cousins, um, and coming back, when it gets dark. You got that one street light in the entire community. But that's where I'm from. That's the place that bred me. That gave me this insatiable appetite to want to pursue things unknown. I was never afraid of the dark, and when we heard gunshots, we would walk out on the porch saying, what they kill, what is it, deer, whatever.
Trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so, and that was the environment that bred me, and then eventually going into the city, going to college, joining the military, Navy, and getting out and pursuing art. Pretty much that's it.
Yeah. When did that pursuit start?
Well, I'll tell you, I used to want to be a writer. I watched a TV show, a kid growing up in the 90s, Daria, Felicity, Dawson's Creek, all that stuff. And I wanted to be a writer because I felt like I never had a voice. And for me, that was a way for me to think about things. It was a way for me to explore things, to seek out questions. And so I wrote. But it was I kept a journal. It was when I kept a journal and it wasn't so, the things I wrote in it wasn't so good about my experience growing up in an abusive household. And so my mother found it, and I discovered the consequences of written words, that words do have effect. So I tried to change the wording, and for me, writing just wasn't doing it anymore because even though I was hiding things in plain sight just in case it was found again, the process of writing those words and changing the names and things like that, it just didn't feel authentic. And I mistakenly got placed in an art class, an international baccalaureate art class in ninth grade, and that's like an advanced pre-college program. I was placed there mistakenly, and I found a new language for myself. that allowed me to say things with symbols and hide things in plain sight. And unlike written words, you can be the most prolific writer, but it takes someone, there's this gap, this divorce physically, where it takes someone having to know you as a writer, go get that book off the shelf, and then open that book. And usually when society changes and people ban things, the first thing they ban is books. But with artwork, it's different. Even Hitler, when he burned all the books, he kind of hesitated with the artwork, so he just gathered it. There's this hesitation with art. You can close a book and hide knowledge, but with art, it's right there in your face. You can't, and people have this almost sacred relationship with art, to where even if it's something against their beliefs, they tend to hesitate. And I, as a kid who watched people out of survival, growing up as the quiet kid, any quiet kids in here know you've heard this growing up, where like you're at the family function, you're the one with the book in the back room watching TV, and then you see all the little dirt people come out there smoking. They be like, oh, don't say nothing. Right. Oh, he quiet, he ain't gonna say nothing. That became my name. Oh, he quiet, he ain't gonna say nothing. And I became an observer of human behavior. And I started to write about it and then translate that into art. And for me, that's why I discovered the power of art. I got to hide things in plain sight, and it could never be taken away, because there was always that gap, that pause. And even if people wanted to get rid of art, they would think twice.
Yeah, man. I kind of want to touch back on your history as a writer, right? Because looking at your works, there was this one thing when we talked. You mentioned like a visual language, right? Can you kind of expound upon that a bit? Because I know we talked about the symbols, right? The symbolism in your work. Can you kind of talk to us and lead us down that rabbit hole of how your writing and your art kind of found itself intertwined?
Well, with writing, I wanted to be a journalist. I want to be a poet. Anything I saw on TV, I was one of those kids where one day I can wake up and be a Muslim, the next day I wake up and I'm interested in ancient Chinese philosophy, and I'm taking a deep dive, because I grew up on the Goonies and Indiana Jones, so I'm always looking for an adventure. Yeah. And it's funny I say that now, and I'm thinking about it in real time. This stuff looks like it would be in an Indiana Jones movie with the. But no, I'm a product of my time, and it's like I love language. I love what language can do. And so I've always heard some people say that artists are always trying to do what poets can do with language. And I was like, no, they can't. Artists are the shit. Fuck that. But it's true. It's true. With language, you can change lives with language, with the right words. Words can be misinterpreted. How many text messages have we sent? It was like, damn, I didn't mean it that way. I know they're going to read it this way. So things could get lost in translation with language, written language. Whereas with art, I was trying to marry the two, because I always feel like they go hand in hand. And so when I first started doing art as a medium, or using it as a platform, I was always having script in my artwork in the beginning. And so my teacher, growing up in Mississippi, my teacher was always like, because she was from England, we always copied her accent. She was like, you don't want to have script in your writing because it takes away from the meaning. Yeah. I'm like, Harry Potter, Yeah. And she would always say that you don't have to be so obvious in your artwork with script. But for some reason it went together. Yeah. And then I discovered artists like Cy Twombly, and I discovered artists like Jenny Saville, Saville. Yeah. And they use script. So I was always trying to find a way to marry the two, but something happened to where writing became my mistress and art became, my number one love.
Yeah. Man, I think that's powerful. I think that's a powerful sentiment. So, for the meat and potatoes of it all right? A blanket statement, a word, an acronym, ADOA, all right? What is it?
It's evolving. It's still trying to find out what it is. I'll tell you what it means. A''DOE'. ADOA means the American Descendants of Enslaved African. You have American, you have where we're from and how we got from that, and you have African at the end. American African, descendant of. And so I love language, but I've always said that sometimes you have to realize that language is ambiguous. We have a whole field of philosophy that teaches you how to decipher shit that's hidden in language. I think it's semantics, epistemology, yeah, that word, you know? And so, you know, language is very ambiguous. And so for me, like, I wanted to be specific. You know, I heard ADOS and stuff like that, and I was using those terms, and I think they serve a purpose, they really do, even if they are just simply place markers for us to say, okay, we need to have a word that defines exactly who we are and where we come from, and then tie that back into the islands, and then let them tie that back into Brazil, and then let them tie that back into West Africa. You know, and so it's like Adoa for me is the beginning, it's the place marker. Is it a name to describe us specifically? Yes. Is it a philosophy? It's being built out? Yes. Is it a way of doing art? Yes. Is it something I want to grow into a philosophy that black artists use to create their own visual language that's based off that philosophy? Yes. So it's so many things and no thing at all. It's blues, jazz, it's sweet potato pie, it's close my goddamn screen door and letting all my air out. You know, it's those things.
Yeah. Man, funny story. Just a little tidbit about the history between me and Tony. And this might matter, this might not matter at all. Like I said, when I first saw his works, I was apprehensive, right? Wayne believed in it. I was just a little apprehensive. Wayne knows me to be the art guy, right? Where am I going with this? So when I first walked into his house, right? Keep in mind, Wayne and Tony's already in there. It's like a literal cave. We tried to recreate the ambiance of his home in this space the best we could. But man, it was like this cave. It was kind of darked out, all blue lights. If you guys look around, the blue light is illuminating some of the reliefs of these pieces. And I was a little creeped out, right? But then, man, one of the things that kind of like drew me in to it all, right, was these symbols, these things that almost look like hieroglyphs, right? Like even this piece right here, it kind of looks like something you might, I don't know, historians might capture that was engraved in a wall centuries and billions of years ago. Can you speak to us about some of the symbolism in your work and how it ties back to, your love for your art, language, and history? I'm sorry, that was wordy.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm trying my best not to be boisterous and jump up and be all up and down. Like it's time. Fuck y'all.
Yeah.
But it's time. Like it's time for Black people. When I say Black people, I'm talking about Black Americans, our cousins in Jamaica, and even the cousins we never include in this conversation, which is our Black people in Canada. We forget about the ones who went up there. So it's like we have to have a language that we all can fall underneath. And I was like, African Americans technically, genetically, are only 450 years old. This country isn't even 500 years old. So I'm like, we're still in our primitive age. If you look at ancient Greece, ancient Rome, they've had thousands of years to develop culture, writing systems, aesthetics that they all fall underneath. You know, if I say the word Europe, and think of the art from Europe, there's this aesthetic that exists in the artwork and sculptures in England, Paris, all of it, Russia, tying it all together. And it's like, well, where's ours? Where's ours where's the aesthetic that appears in our art? Beyond cowrie shells, beyond decorative things. You know, and I didn't want to do that. I was going to do that in the beginning because I didn't know, but I was like, if you're going to do this, take a deep dive. So you have to understand the script. So I went back and said, okay, let me divorce myself as much as I can from European aesthetics and ideals of art and beauty. So I was like, let me go back and study the Aztecs. Let me go back and study the Mayans. Let me go back and study the West African cultures. Let me approach it with complete ignorance. You know, ignorance is not a bad word, but let me approach it with complete ignorance so I can act as a sponge and absorb these things. And so I consider my mind to be this machine. I was like, let me feed this machine. I don't know what it's going to spit out, but let me pour every ingredient. Let me consume every image I can. Let me flip through every history book. Hell, I will watch the cooking channel because I'm looking for something. And so when I started to do the artwork, make the sketches, because I'm a big believer in the sketchbook. And this is just my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe a true artist keeps a sketchbook because it's an extra brain.
Yeah.
Because we probably, as artists, I know some of you in here are artists, you've probably forgotten some of the best ideas more than the stuff you've executed. And so I've always been big on a sketchbook, and with the sketchbook, I was able to pour everything. Even when I was looking at all these indigenous cultures around the world, trying to look for this thread that wove itself between all of them, it was when they were starting out and creating civilization, the first thing they did was start with, these indigenous looking images, and usually it was some form of script telling a story.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, how could I tell our story? So I heard some people say, and I'm open to it all. I'm completely taking all this in as an anthropologist, or I'm not, but like an anthropologist. And I'm like, okay, let me lay out all the possibilities in front of me. Is it possible that we could unite under one script that told all of our stories? Are we the real Israelites? Were we here before Columbus? What did Mansa Musa's predecessor land here? Is it possible that he landed among the Native Americans? I'm asking these questions not to just omit anything. I'm considering all possibilities.
Yeah.
When did the Portuguese get here? When did the Spanish get here? What do they call these places? Because I'm realizing that this country is very young, so it needs something that looks primitive.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I don't know. I remember this quote by Lauryn Hill. There was this old video when she first joined the Fugees or something. They're standing out on the corner, a bunch of these people, intellectual black people. They're arguing about the Israelites and what we are, this and that. And I know, I'm tied back to the script. She said, they were like, yeah, we were the real Israelites, and somebody else was saying something. And they was like, no, we were here, blah, blah, blah. She cut everybody out. She's like, that's fine and dandy, whatever that is. But what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
If now is ground zero, what do we create now to start from this point? Yes, we could be all those things. That's cool. But what could we do now to affect change and use this moment, the present moment, to create something for the future? And when I watched that video and kept thinking about that for some reason, I was like, okay, let's start now. If I'm starting from scratch, what would this script look like? I said, let me look at black people. Let me look at their bodies. Let me base the script off of their bodies and how they move through life, through everyday life.
Yeah.
So of course I had some black people like, man, you that weird white folk shit, what the fuck you looking at? But I'm staring at people, I'm studying their movements, I'm looking at their bodies. And I'm like, okay, so when a black person's angry, they do this. Oh shit. When a black person in Mississippi is angry, oh shit. When a black person in rural Mississippi is angry, they do this differently from someone who's from Jackson.
Yeah.
Or somebody from Memphis. I'm noticing similarities. I'm like, okay, that's the thread.
Yeah.
Look at the ways in which black people's bodies move in real life and put that in the script.
Yeah.
And so now you have a script that's based on our bodies, because if we have no culture or material culture, objects, sculptures, religious relics, if we don't have that, then what would the script be based off of?
Yeah.
Our own bodies. That's the only thing we had. So that's where that came from. And it's just pretty much people telling stories using their bodies.
Yeah, man. I kind of want to dive deeper into the work itself, right? Tony's work is very tactile, right? Over the next few days, we're going to open it up for you guys to really come in and get a really in-depth experience, right? A lot of his works that you can actually touch, like this burlap has symbols, right? It has a feeling to it. And not to go super deep into the tactileness of it, but they're recurring things over and over, like the tactileness, these people, these symbols, and there's literally a symbol right next to Tony that, like, man, it shit almost brought me to tears once I kind of figured it out. Legit, this symbol right here next to you, Tony, could you explain to us what some of these hieroglyphs mean.
Okay, well, I did variations of the symbol, and you can see it right here in this larger piece in the middle. That was me I got a piece of burlap. I was like, okay, let me throw everything I have at this thing, and that was the beginning. So the symbol for African Americans was going to be the 3 circles, with the first circle showing different sticks or whatever coming from it, and that's like, okay, that's an archetype or representation of us coming from different unknown tribes. We don't know where, but we come from somewhere. We exist. We're living, we're breathing, we're here, we have blood pumping through our body. We came from somewhere. So then you have the middle circle, which had the wave going through it, which represents the middle passage, the crossing of the Atlantic or the transportation across the Atlantic. And then you have the last circle, which is a circle within a circle, which is how we are to survive going into the future, which is cocooning ourselves. And so I was like, okay, that's a little bit too much. Let me keep playing with that. And I kept playing with it over and over, writing it down, including in the artwork at the time, until I was like, no, it needs to be something that had a little bit more swag than that. And so then I settled on this, the circle with the 3 waves. The circle representing a body, the human body, and the 3 waves represent the Atlantic Ocean. So if the circle is above the wave, that means that someone lived and you are alive. You are alive. You may not know who they are, where they come from, what tribe, what idiosyncrasies they had, what recipes they use, but because you are physically alive, a meat suit with blood pumping through your body and veins, someone survived. And so that's what this circle means. I was like, oh, well, this symbol means, I was like, okay, that would be a fire-ass symbol for African Americans. But the way my mind is, and being an artist, having 100,000 miles a minute mind or thoughts, I was like, but it has to be a symbol that other black cultures can plug into. So, damn, I can't just talk about us. I have to talk about Jamaica, Haiti, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and all the little islands in between. So it has to be a basic symbol that carried a lot of weight and a lot of meaning. So I was like, okay, point blank, this is a symbol for African Americans. I'm not telling y'all don't have to do this. It was just me for the artwork. I can't tell y'all what to do, but this is, what it was. For me, I was like, this is what it would look like to me if it was that. Now, you notice that the circle is below the waves. I'm pretty sure you know what that means. They were thrown overboard. They didn't make it. And there were so many black people, black Africans, let's be specific. Yeah. Language is important. Yeah. There were so many Africans thrown overboard during the Middle Passage that it changed the migration patterns of sharks. That's bodies upon bodies upon bodies discarded, tossed over, raped, thrown over after it was raped, beaten, mutilated, for example. Again, Africans, not yet Americans, Africans. And so I wanted to show that because it needed to be heavy. Yeah. And it needed to be the same symbol for life. In reverse, it's the same symbol for death. It's almost like tarot cards, You get one reading when it's faced upward, maybe not what I'm talking about. I'm thinking is like tarot cards. You get one reading, and when it's in reverse, it means something completely different. Yeah. But that's what that particular symbol means. Yeah. And that's why it appears in almost everything or a variation of it.
Man, and I'm not even trying to really go super deep into my experience, because I will speak about it, but I kind of want to shed light on some of the things that I walked into. Tony had a book of the history of lynchings, right? And page 1 is words. Page 2 is a picture. Page 3, a picture. It's a photo book of it all, right? So hearing him speak about these things, watching and looking at these things, it's like putting this hold on my spirit in a way, right? Couple that with me not necessarily being open to the idea of what a Doa is and meant yet, still being very, not even like ignorant, right? We already said that ignorant isn't a bad word. Being ignorant to some of the figures in his works. Each and every figure, I'll just say it outright, right? Because this is one of your biggest critiques. One of his biggest critiques is that, one of his biggest critiques is that it looks devilish, right? It looks really dark, right? Like it's invoking some type of spirit. And once he kind of broke it down to me, it made me feel safe. Right? So I kind of, I'm putting that out there to you to say, can you talk to us about some of the figures and the reasons why they are horned? They adorn these large horns that appear to be dark.
Well, there are two answers to that.
Yeah.
So since this is being filmed, fuck it.
Yeah, run it. Come on, man, run it. And it's a build-up, so we're going to get there,
And
too.
so the horns, at first they weren't horns. You may see in the ancestral pledge piece or the ancestral pact piece up here. The only ones in my work that ever had horns were true Africans, or the first Africans, you know, the original ones. And anyone after that, since we are the descendants, the American descendants of enslaved Africans, I gave us symbols, hieroglyphics, different hieroglyphics. We didn't have horns. And so I put hieroglyphics where there would be, I thought of phantom limbs. When your limb is cut off, they say you still feel it. So I was like, we still felt something, we just weren't able to see it. And so I was like, okay, let that be like these weird symbols. And I started there. And I remember getting the first African's horns. I'm like, but like, what do they mean? Because again, I didn't know what this machine was going to spit out. Mind you, the whole time I'm just studying, looking, going through images. I don't care if it's, again, a recipe or me watching a cooking show and seeing the process and extracting from that. I'm just throwing everything indiscriminately into my machine. I'm like, whatever the fuck it spits out, it spits out. And so I happened to come across like the idea of using hieroglyphics because I didn't want to scare people. I'm already painting or drawing naked black people, and that's sacrilegious to black grandmas, you know, like, why you got the ass showing, you know, you know. So something just said, go with the horns, and a friend of mine who's a devout Christian from Mississippi, she was like, you know, I mean, your shit does look demonic and shit, but if you're gonna go with the horns. Like, it's gonna make people like, it's gonna grab them. I'm like, what, grab them? What, grab them? You know, so I was like, okay, since you're a Christian on the weekends only, I guess it goes what you say, it's gonna grab them. And even I felt uncomfortable with that. I'm like, God damn, so let me be real. I'm a black gay man and I'm doing fucking horns. They were like, you going to hell twice. I'm like, well, okay, fuck it. You know, it's the horns it is. And it's like, I will tell you, there were mornings where I would walk through my house and those eyes, the gold eyes and the horns would just be like fucking weirding me out. I didn't understand it. And so I have friends who are into spiritualism, Ife, I don't know if I'm saying that right, they're gonna kill me. Yeah, that word. Yeah. And other things. And the other ATRs, and I was explaining to them, I was like, well, I got these images. They were like, well, what's going on? I'm like, well, I can smell it. I can, when I close my eyes, I can smell blood. I can smell the females having cycles in the bottom of the ship. I can taste the, like, dimes or nickels or pennies in my tongue and all these things. And I'm like, and I can feel the horns. And they were like, you are an artist, right? I'm like, yeah. They was like, well, you know, the first artists were shamans, and you're probably channeling something. And I'm like, well, I don't understand what it is. And he was like, well, just put it down. They all told me to put it down. So I'm doing the horns. I'm writing about them, trying to understand the significance of horns. And for me, the only thing that I could come up with is being from rural Mississippi. You know, again, going back when I hear gunshots, we didn't duck or nothing. We, like, what they kill. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I grew up with horns. I grew up with taxidermy. You know, when you kill a deer, like, it's a rite of passage for males, whether, I don't care if you're gay, straight, back, whatever, you funny acting, as they say, you know, you're going hunting. You're gonna learn how to shoot a gun. You're gonna learn how to ride a four-wheeler and fix on shit, you know, and so you're gonna learn about killing deer and killing hogs or pigs and going hunting. It was just a part of the culture. And I thought to myself, oh shit, I grew up with horns all around me or antlers, and here I am applying what I eventually come in contact with religiously in urban areas. You know, I'm taking on their relationship with these things. These things were normal to me. It was normal for me to walk out in the field and pick blackberries. Catfish was normal. It was a part of staple, like everyday life. Just like I don't want to get beat up or whatever. Just like crawfish and shrimp is in everything in New Orleans. you know, everything in Mississippi is, comes from the hog, comes from deer. You get sent with deer sausages and, whatever when you go. But it's like, I grew up with these things around me, so I'm like, let me incorporate them. So when you hear me talk about these things, I may sound contradictory. Like, I thought he said the horns meant this. I thought he got it from that. Well, a lot of things are happening at the same time. I'm pulling references into that machine constantly. So I may not know the origin of where it got from, but it's all making sense. My mind behind an artist's mind is like ChatGPT. You put stuff in it, and you don't know what it's going to spit out, but it's going to be something that comes out subconsciously. And so that's what happened. And I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to put these horns in this work, like everybody told me to, then what do they have to mean? What must they mean? I'm starting from the ground up. I'm trying to leave something behind. This is my love letter. This is my foundation, my scaffolding for Black artists who are yet to be born. What am I going to leave them behind? What meaning am I going to apply to them? So I'm like, okay, Mother Nature tends to give its most vulnerable creatures the biggest ways of protecting themselves. Like, goats. I know you've seen those goats bash the fuck out of each other's heads on the side of the mountains. I'm like, okay, I've seen that in real life, with people. I'm like, so if Mother Nature were to give, its most vulnerable human being on this continent, which is African Americans, if we were to give its most vulnerable human beings in this country a way of protecting itself, what would it be? And I was telling someone earlier, a group of people earlier, that it would have been claws, wings, or horns, or antlers. And I was like, well, Black people, horns. I mean, we're gaudy. We would have jewelry on the motherfuckers. We would carve them out.
Right.
Like, they'll be swagged out. You have horn gloves, like mine better than yours. You low class,
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Horn beef,
horns would be it.
Yeah.
Horns would be it. And they would, and I thought about it. I'm like, I'm starting looking for words to apply to these horns. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what would horns be? What has protected the Black community that the horns could represent? I'm like, okay, it could be jazz. The horns could be jazz. It could be blues. It could be gospel. It could be sermons. It could be the deacon, on his knees at the pulpit just crying and praying. It's all those things. So the horns have now become a metaphor for all the ways in which we have protected ourselves. So the horns is secret double speak. It's that language that's hidden in blues. Let's go, baby, to the hole in the wall. It's double speak. It's hiding in plain sight.
Definitely. And that was going to be my next question. Some of your influences when creating the work, right? Because it's so deep, man. So powerful. Like, from the content to the materials to literally the colors. What are some of the things that, well, we know already, right? Some of the influences, right? Some of your influences from your early childhood, some of the things you read. But one thing I've learned about you was that, like, you're really in tune with music, right? What are some of those influences when you create, and how do they fuel the process?
Well, there are two things. I will say this, and I know it's going to seem, I'm an artist, so I'm allowed to do this, say about random shit, ramble. I'm going to ramble for a little bit, but it makes sense. It's going to make sense. So for me, music is important because I'm from Mississippi. And music to me is, from me being an outsider, a transplant here, music for us in Mississippi, blues and gospel, it's not two different things in Mississippi. It's one singular thing. It's one thing, and we didn't even have those names, blues and gospel. It was called good music, or just music. And at least where I grew up. And it was like, outsiders called it that. And so for me, it was, okay, you guys have the dancing. Oh my God, it's the dancing, it's the rhythm, the Super Sundays. I didn't want to say Super Bowl.
Second line, the second line.
Second lines and all that. And I'm trying to figure, I'm like, okay, I'm rambling, but I'm tied back.
Come on.
I'm like, okay, culture, what is culture? What is culture? What is culture? And I'm thinking, Mississippi is music. But what is it? Why is it different in New Orleans? Why is it different in New York? Why is it different in the Carolinas? What is this thread I'm looking for? I'm looking for more threads. And I'm like, okay, well, as far as music inspiring me, I'm looking at ways in which those things in different communities, black communities, have inspired their artists. And I start looking and examining underneath the telescope, like Zora Neale Hurston. And I'm like, okay, what is it that I'm seeing that I'm not seeing? What is it that I need to pay close attention to? And so I'm looking at black artists from different areas and seeing what they're saying in their interviews. I'm watching artist talks, seeing how they describe what inspires them. And so I leaned into that culture, my culture. And I'm like, but is it culture? They're saying we don't have a culture. What is it? And I learned these two terms that changed everything for me. Yeah. You have symbolic culture and you have material culture. I was like, oh, so when they're saying we don't have culture, they're talking about material culture, artworks, unified artworks, religious dress, jewelry, things that you can touch. So they don't know what they're saying, and we don't know what we're defending. So they're pretty much saying you don't have a material culture, and we're saying we do. But what we're saying we have is symbolic culture, meaning things you carry inside you, song, recipes, religious practices, whatever can't be physically stripped from your body. That's symbolic culture. Things you can pass down through your voice, through your actions. That's symbolic culture. I'm like, okay, fuck them. We get it. It's just different things, we got it. So I'm like, I wanted to lean into that symbolic culture. So when I had those two terms now, that gave me everything I needed. Yeah. And it taught me how to extract from my culture, which is, if I'm from Mississippi, we had blues and gospel. Right. So I'm like, my people hid everything there. Okay, bet. So I started leaning into it. And when I was in college, I interned at this record company called Malaco Records. And I had access to all, no, I did. No, I didn't. But being an intern, I'm listening, I'm working in accounting, I'm seeing I was responsible for scanning in all these documents and receipts and everything. And I'm like, why am I scanning in all this shit? And I'm realizing that these are the lyrics that was written at a restaurant where some of your favorite artists from the 60s and 70s was sitting there probably smoking, eating. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm seeing how much they're paying for things. And I'm like, okay, so I'm pulling from my experiences from that. I'm pulling from all of them. I'm like, okay, I've been trained for this. I didn't know it, but I was being trained to know these musicians. I would see Johnny Taylor's, relatives coming in, and I would hear gospel artists calling in with the nastiest words. Where my damn money at? My check, so I'm seeing all these things. I'm like, all this symbolic culture that was around me and in my life, let me pull from that. So I'm listening to, all the typical blues songs we hear in Mississippi growing up. Let's go, baby, to the hole in the wall. 3 people sleeping in my bed. Me and my woman and the man in her head. She's getting what she wants. She's just not getting what she wanted from. Gospel. The Malaco commercial with the old people with a doctor appointment wig on. I'm coming up, Jesus, on the rough side. Those things. I'm pulling from that. And as a writer now, I'm listening to the metaphors. I'm like, oh shit. I'm listening to all the symbols and the recipes and how to deal with life in those things. And now I'm taking that symbolic culture and translating it into material culture. So now I'm taking all those things that were hidden, I'm extracting the DNA from that and saying, my people left me these things. And they left me these love letters. Well, I grew up around these love letters. So let me use this, translate it, and leave these things as love letters to young black artists who are yet to be born. And let me tell them how to do it. Let me use my life to remove an obstacle. Surely I can do contemporary art. I can do things that other people are doing right now. The stuff that you see popping on Instagram, the celebrity worshiping art. But what got me off of that, and I'm going off on a tangent, what got me off of that is hearing Kerry James Marshall when someone asked him, why don't you do pictures of celebrities? He said, well, anything that ever happened to black people in a bad way in this country that started things to change for us as far as legislation, it wasn't celebrities. They were in their mansions, in their homes, protected by their money. He said it was always the common black person. That's why they will always be central to my work. It was always them who got shot or hung or something happened to their body that they had no control over. So I took that, I was like, okay, bet, I'm taking that up. That's another ancestor. Well, he's not ancestor now, but he's still alive. But that's another elder, writing a love letter on how to do this. So I wanted to lean into that symbolic culture and extract it, because I'm here now. I have the pattern recognition that all of us artists have. I'm using that, strengthening it, understanding it, and putting it into the work and leaving it behind for them.
Yeah.
And so this is my Indiana Jones moment. Indy, like, yeah, I did it, I left it, use it. You don't have to do this part of the work. This is the scaffolding.
I think we gotten to the point to where I think y'all know Tony gets very passionate about his work, and he starts to peel back the layers of who he is, right? So when talking about symbolic culture to material culture, the difference between the two, and you think that, damn, this is a profound thought, and you say it out loud, you know what his response is? I know, motherfucker. I know it is. You know what I'm saying? So, no, seriously. And I mean, I think that, first of all, I love the confidence. I do. I think that that's something like needed, especially if you know that you have real substance behind any mark that you're putting down. I think that that's important. So what I'm really trying to get at, even though you kind of touched on it already, so we don't have to go super deep into it. If we had to sum it up really quickly, right? Just that, knowing that substance, right? Creating that that clear material aspect of it all. How does that make you feel?
Oh my God! You told me to be quick. I can't be quick, so I'm gonna skip.
Yeah.
It's bitter.
Yeah.
It feels peaceful. It's like sitting on a seesaw.
Yeah.
Damn it! It started. I had this thing when I hear I say certain phrases, I think of songs. I'm thinking of Aretha Franklin. Your love is like a seesaw.
Yeah.
But no, it's bitter because this was in my mind. I know somebody told me the other night that this thing is for me, but in my mind, this is supposed to be a collective thing. Mm-hmm. When I first got here, I tried reaching out to other black artists. I sent emails, I sent DMs, and yes, I may have come off a little crazy and rambunctious. Hey, I saw you're an artist, so let's work together. Here's the plan. They were like, what the fuck, block? You know? And it was me just being like, oh, I'm in black artistic Mecca in the South. So of course there are other people here. And so I'm coming with books. I'm like this crazy scientist in a lab, with all these books, anthropology, history, psychology, philosophy, tying it all together and trying to develop a language for us. And I reached out to my people, but the only people who reached back that I didn't even reach out to were white people. And I was like, damn it, I want black people. And one of our friends said, from Atlanta, of course, he was like, child, you wasting your time. Them black folks ain't gonna pay you no mind. You a sissy. And I was like, fuck you too, bitch. I was like, they're gonna listen if they got it. He was like, you wasting your time. You better go with them white folks. And I was like, no, it's for them. It's for us. It's gonna unlock everything. He was like, okay, my green's burning, but you need to buy. He was like, they ain't gonna listen to you. And I was like, no, they have to. This is important. And I have the receipts to prove it. And that's why I say it's a bitter moment. I'm supposed to be celebrating this language, this new thing. But they gave me their ass to kiss. And I can't help but think. I'm tying that back to the people I've studied. So the only other person who I can relate to that had this experience was Alain Locke, which is a godfather of mine in my mind. His work, his writings, planted the seed for all of this. And he's the father of the Harlem Renaissance, but nobody really knows him because he was a punk, a sissy, but he tried his damnedest to get all those black people together, and nobody wanted to work with him. W. Du Bois set him up. All these other people who we herald as heroes set him up. And so he was the first Black Rhodes Scholar in England. They set him up when he went there, the white people there. And so when he was there, he just talked about his experience trying to pull people together and how he wanted to accomplish things. He can see it in his mind, but the most difficult thing was getting black people to come together. And he said, well, let me understand where that comes from. Let me understand that. And so I felt like I was facing that, and I'm supposed to be celebrating this thing that I accomplished. But for me, I'm coming from a place, Mississippi, where we didn't have words like I and my. It was our and us. And so that's the framework that I was coming from. And this was supposed to be celebratory, and it really is.
Yeah.
But there's a bigger mission here.
Yeah.
There's an all hands on deck thing here.
Can I catch you there? Because that kind of leads into, and I know you touched on it too, like my last question. Man, with everything here, right? From Tony, who are these people in these paintings? I forgot to talk about that. Who are these people in these paintings? We have Harriet. We have the twin sisters. Mississippi, Alabama, correct? We have. Can you just give us like some rapid fire?
Okay. Well, when I indulge in some libations, whatever they are, I went into deep meditation, and I remember just thinking, okay, what the fuck am I doing? Closing my eyes, and then something happened, snapped. I was pulled into this darkness, whatever the fuck it was. I'm like, what the fuck did you just take? Or smoke, and so only thing I can remember is something felt ancient. It grabbed my hand. It didn't have a face. It had a triangle for a head. And when I tried looking at his face, I just saw the galaxy. It was deep quietness, and I just saw stars everywhere. And I didn't hear it say it, but it grabbed me by the wrist and it says, I got this one, go get the other ones, he's gonna need them. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it wasn't a voice, it was a feeling.
Yeah.
And it was like, you do the work and the others will show up.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I've been trying for 11 years and 5, they've been blocking me online. It just gave me this thing, just do the work and they will show up.
Yeah.
And so I came out of that and I just went to work.
Yeah.
I just went to work and I'm seeing these faces. I'm listening to blues, I'm listening to gospel. And I was like, well, Stanislaw Zukowski said, never work for models. Anything you have in you as an artist, you're trying to make it indigenous and make it original. Do not look at other artists' work. Divorce yourself from those images. Divorce yourself from everything that's European-based standards of beauty. And just suck your talent from, oh God, wrong term. Take your talent from yourself. Yeah. Take your talent from yourself because there's something ancient within you. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, if I'm not going to be working for models, where are these faces going to come from? Mm-hmm. So I'm listening to blues, I'm listening to gospel, I'm crying and shit, drinking wine, and just having a moment, and I just get to work, and the faces come out. Mm-hmm. And I remember there's this artist named Jenny Saville, British artist, and what she does is she leaves her eras in her work. Because she said, we're going to go into a time, and she was ahead of time when she said this. She said, intelligence, artificial intelligence is going to be right on par with humans. So we need to show something that we're human, show that this was made by humans' hands. And so she leaves a lot of her mistakes in her work. And for me, I explored that. And sometimes the mistakes transformed into people's faces I've never seen before. Like Isabella, the flagship piece over there. If you start walking from the right to the left, under the right lighting conditions, her face goes from feminine to masculine, and the opposite direction from masculine to feminine, because those are two different faces. Two halves of two different faces. And I'm like, well, okay, let me look at the meaning. I don't know what a lot of my ancestors look like. Growing up in rural Mississippi, we didn't take a lot of pictures, And so I'm like, okay, well, let me just create an amalgamation of the people that I see, the black people I see. Some of these features are watered down, whatever they originally came from. So I'm looking.
I'm sorry, I meant to catch you when you talked about Isabella. Can you tell us who Isabella is?
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, a lot of my work is grounded in history.
Yeah.
And so Isabella is the first African to give birth in the American colonies. I used to say American continent, but then I realized during research that there were black people here in Spanish Florida already. So I had to be specific again with language. I had to be specific and say, well, the American colonies. So Isabella was the first African to give birth on American colonies to the technical first African American. She was from Angola region. And so, oh, perfect. This tells that story, actually. This piece is called The Origin, and it tells the origins of the idea of the African American. So you have Isabella and Antony, which came from the Angola region, and they was on a Portuguese ship that was selling to, I didn't even know this, selling to Mexico. So that's where a chunk of your slaves are going to, the Mexican region. They got them from Angola, and they stopped in Jamaica and picked up 24 males on that ship. That same ship was sailing in the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, and it got taken over by 2 British ships that were masquerading as Dutch ships, pirates. And so they took half the cargo and let that ship go on to Mexico, and they split the cargo between the 2 ships. One of the ships, the White Lion, arrived in Virginia in August of 1619 with Isabella and Antony on board. And a couple of days later, the treasurer arrived and let off half its cargo and took the rest to Bermuda. So now the African American origin story is Angola, Isabella, Antony on that as well, Jamaica, the Gulf of Mexico, Virginia, and Bermuda. And so that is the origin story of Africans in the American colonies. And so I was like, okay, well, Isabella, like, what does she look like? No pictures whatsoever. I only have a few facts, about her and Antony. So I have them illustrated here, and they're joined with the gold ring around their wrist. But that's her blown up over there with the black face and the scarifications on her face. And for me, I wanted those to represent the depths of her tears, kind of like the water carving out of a valley across her cheeks. And so I consider her to be Queen Mother, and that's where that comes from. And her face, like I said again, if you walk from left to right, it's an amalgamation of different faces and different features I've noticed in the African American faces. And as far as this face, it's just an archetype for like us being formed. It's still being formed. There was never a finished being, a finito, or being formed. It's always evolving and forming. But this tells that story. And the hands, for me, I wanted to show I wanted to see what that would look like, our genetic makeup. So of course the top hand represents the African American or the Black American. And these represents the 3 groups that African Americans came in contact with on American soil. So this first palm is African American, and you have the Native American palm, the African palm, and the European palm. So I asked myself, let me just do 5. What were the top 5 Native American tribes that genetically make up or came in contact with African Americans, or Africans, let me make that clear, came up in contact with Africans in the American. So I got the 5 tribes, put their DNA in there. Then I said, what are the top 5 tribes or regions where West Africans came from? Put their DNA there, and of course, the 5 European types, genetic people that make up us. So there you have our genetic makeup. And then right here, this figure, which is important, and I was trying to figure out how would I tie all this together? I was like, well, let me speak to the artist. So now I created this figure that represents the archetype, or is the archetype, for the Black American artist. Yeah. So you're not just an artist. Artist is what other people call you. You're a philosopher, you're a writer, you're an anthropologist, you're a historian, you're a thinker. So for me, in my mind, that's why I want to tell the future Black artists that are yet to be born, pursue these things and let those things come out in artwork or whatever your creative medium is.
Man, Tony, I need to call you to get like a real history lesson, a sit down. Like it is that deep, is that powerful, and I feel like we really only touched the tip of the iceberg here. But we coming up to our hour, man. My last question, and I know you touched on it a little bit earlier. This was the one I was going to say before I asked you about the people. Man, with all of your research, with all of your studies, man, it feels like you feel behind this, and it isn't just good feelings. It's feelings that would send the I don't know how I want to say it.
Send somebody to the nut house.
Send somebody to the nut house. And send them to
The only way I can describe it is
Yeah.
Indiana Jones again, one of the movie before the last, The Crystal Skull, where the lady with the bob, you know,
no, for sure.
she came in contact with the aliens at the end, and they said, well, what do you want to know? She said, I want to know everything.
Yeah.
And her eyes, all the power shot into her eyes, and she was getting all human knowledge, all knowledge of the universe, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega. And that would be me. I wouldn't want to die, but I would want that. And that's what it did to me. This, taking a deep dive into our history, it literally feels like that all the time. Even when I'm rolling a blunt, like to making coffee, to doing art, I can't help but have all these things in my head churning on its own. I'll be randomly like drawing or sketching, watching a YouTube video, and then something click, I snap, and all of a sudden I can see a 12-year-old crying, giving birth, and she's surrounded by 2 other young kids crying because they don't know what's happening to her body, and she's squatting down, giving birth. And that probably, my mind is churning that out on autopilot because of the stories I've read about somebody being a 13-year-old, 12-year-old mom during slavery. Or, you know, or I'll be randomly cooking me something to eat, and bam, my mind go, because that's the way an artist's mind is. You don't know where inspiration is going to strike. You don't know what little thing is going to spark you, or spark a narrative. And it's like another snap, I'm in the bottom of the slave ship, and I can see the rats crawling over the body. I can smell things. It's sensory for me. And that may be a part of me being a writer also, because it's world building on its own. And for me, it's a heavy thing, which is, it goes back to, I need help. There's too much history. There's too much history, and it's not just for black people. This is a call to white people no, not white. Let me be specific with language. The American descendants of European immigrants. We need all their help because it's all hands on deck. And I know white artists are afraid to touch these things, but we didn't create this by ourselves. We didn't enslave ourselves. We didn't pass these laws to limit our ability for our bodies to move through life by ourselves. We didn't do these things. So we need all hands on deck. Now, there are certain subjects that we are allowed to touch that other people don't, but then there are subjects that other people should touch because we don't know how to process those emotions. And so for me, it's a heavy subject, to answer your question, and I do need help. I need help. If I'm working on the beginning of slavery, I need somebody to be working on the 1950s. Well, look at me telling people what to do. If you feel it in your heart to leave behind love letters for future artists and put your name in the history books, even if for selfish reasons, this is how you get into the history books. You do something that shakes the foundation of what art is. You say fuck their rules, you break them. You know, you don't have to judge your art according to European standards. You don't have to have art that looks realistic. Show your mistakes. That becomes your visual language if you repeat them over and over again. You want to create art in a way to where if people come in contact with your work just one time, if they never see you again and they're in some other city or state or country and they see it from 100 feet away, like, I don't know who these is, but I can tell you who that one is. That is your visual language. Those are the combination of your mistakes. So create a distinctive visual language that is distinctively yours. But if you want to and feel it in your heart, plug it into this. Don't copy this, but plug it into it. But plug into it. Look at it, study it. You know, I'm not saying I'm some person on a high horse, but I know this shit is good. You know what I mean? You know, it's like watching grandma, and then they go to, you know, gaslighting themselves, well, I should have put a little extra, you know it's good.
No, definitely.
But the thing is, it's good because of the content, not so much because of the imagery. That's just the byproduct, but it's the stories. It's digging up things, you know, and then tying it back. Because I don't even, it changed me. I will say, leave it with this, it changed me. Making this art changed me because I'm thinking I'm just creating these things, but I'm like really asking myself questions. What biases do I carry? You know, am I completely ignorant? Do I want to connect to Africa? Do I want to connect to Jamaica? And I was like, not really, but then like I can't but help but to, you know, because it's there. And you got to remember this, and then this is one thing that changed me too, and this is language, specific language. I don't even use the word Black history anymore because Black history is not separate from world history. If you had an alien civilization were to come here and they're studying us, they wouldn't say, oh, this is black history or this blah, blah, blah. They were like, the human history, the human race. You know, and so black history didn't exist in a bubble by itself. You know, slavery started in American colonies because of the 80 Years' War going on in Europe. I don't even think history never happens by itself. It's always connected to something bigger. Yeah. And that's the one thing I would want to leave people with. Like, put some more history in your work.
Yeah. No, that's, man, that is the perfect closing sentiment to all of this, man. Thank y'all for coming. We got Malcolm on the video, so thank you for doing that, Malcolm. Appreciate that. This is our first recorded talk. Tony, thank you for coming through, not only bringing us phenomenal works, but man, dropping some real, like, some heavy things, man, some thought-provoking things, man. So yeah, let's clap it up for Tony, man. Let's clap it up, man. Let's clap it up. Tony was a little bit apprehensive about the flow of all of this. Me and Wayne, like, kind of assured him that, like, we got him. So we personally, well, hopefully I can speak on behalf of Wayne. Thank you for trusting us with your works, these things that you created, these relics, these things that, man, I pray live on, bro, because these stories, this language, the visual language of it all, I think future generations need to see it, you know. So yeah, man, that's I'm Myron, he Tony. It's Adoa. Yeah, man.